Hello everyone, and welcome to Transcend Liberalism. Mythcon. It's been about 2 weeks now, and my mind is still swirling about it. Discussing the current political and social ideas with not only all of the audience, which I absolutely enjoyed, but sitting across from people like Tim Pool and Derek Blackman doing the same thing was just an absolutely amazing experience. Then the threat was made on the venue where I, unbeknownst to me at the time, was sitting and sharing a beer with Melissa Chen from Ideas Without Borders. All the while I'm ripping on New York City in my usual upstate fashion. And she was great about it. She was taking it in stride. So shout out to her and to Justin for buying the round. You guys were awesome company. Thank you so much. I also want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart who helped me achieve my goal and help to get me to Mythcon. I plan on attending next year and will try to bring you even more moments like this, the question that caused a bit of a buzz at Mythcon. Okay, I run a page called Transcend Liberalism, and it's kind of a play on me because I am transgender. And I'm just very curious, how does intersectionalism know what's best for me? Because it seems like with intersectional values and everything, it likes to perpetuate victimhood culture. And it likes to tell people, like he brought up for a minute, that trans people can be fired for being trans, which is actually a misconception because that actually falls under the gender discrimination. But because transgender isn't written in the laws, the victimhood culture likes to perpetuate the idea that, well, you're not covered. So how does intersectionalism know what's best for me? Because to me, the individual is the smallest minority that there is. Now, I will admit, I loaded a lot into that question because there was a line behind me and I wanted to respect the time limits that, so everybody else could ask their question. I had no idea this question was going to blow up the way it did, so I'm going to break it down a bit better. How does intersectionalism know what's best for me? Because what's best for, let's say, Blair White or Ella Grant or even myself isn't necessarily going to be what's best for Milo or Riley Dennis. Our values are different and our stories are not the same. We each have our own individual stories to tell, and from my perspective, intersectionalism seeks to erase that story and just slap the label of, say, trans on me and say you're a victim of those guys over there. I mean, that's what I meant by victimhood culture. It's telling people who have never been a victim in their life that they are one just because of who they are. As for my point on transgender discrimination by getting fired, well, I'll just let the video continue because that will answer itself in a few seconds.
I'm confused because, I mean, it seems like you were just kind of arguing semantic. I mean, you can be fired for being trans in various states, so...
You can be fired for being male too, but that still falls under gender discrimination. That's part of the Equal Opportunity Act.
I think she's saying that even though you can be fired, there's legal recourse under gender discrimination laws.
Okay.
Okay. Next question.
As you can see, Mike just flat out dismisses my point. You can be fired for being trans, but you can also be fired for being female, and you can also be fired for being male. All of those instances fall under the Equal Opportunity Act of gender discrimination laws. This is where the victimhood culture comes in, because the fact is, because transgender isn't listed, you're telling people that they aren't covered. And this discrimination can happen to you or me or any other trans person because the word transgender isn't in there, it's not covered. This is one of the reasons why I'm a red pill. The perpetuation of misconceptions and half-truths among the left has just led me to this point. Espousing these principles is what makes people think that intersectionalism just wants to give people extra rights. But that's not the end of this video. Now it's time to cue the main event.
Could I respond to?
You want to respond to that?
Sorry, I was just confused by the question.
There's a lot to that question. There's so much to unpack.
Well, Chrisiousity, it's been 2 weeks. We've had plenty of time to unpack our bags, so how about we unpack the question? I'm not here to be confrontational to you. I genuinely want to have a civil discussion with you. It's my hope that I left a positive impression on you when I came up to you after the panel and thanked you for speaking. I hope you saw my sincerity in that, as well as I hope you see the sincerity in this debate that I'm proposing with you or Mike or even the both of you.
And it would be really helpful if people would not ask things with like 20 component parts.
Again, I was trying to be respectful of the people behind me.
But again, like I said, dear.
Censorship.
Intersectionality.
Censorship.
The tables of censorship have turned.
Indeed. Intersectionality doesn't tell you what's best for you.
You are correct. Intersectionalism is about what's best for the group as a whole. The point of my question was, how does intersectionalism know what's best for me as a trans individual? Going back to my earlier point of the personal values difference in other trans people, I mentioned like Blair and Riley. Intersectionalism tells these trans people, for instance, that we are going to fight for you. We are going to make the world a more accepting place for you. But how does intersectionalism know that the trans person wants the world that you are building through your ideals? But that's what it seems like.
Hold on. I just want her to respond, and then we have a bunch of questions to get to.
Again.
I appreciate your input, though.
So, all right, look, I brought this here, domestic violence, intersectionality, and culturally competent practice.
What does that have to do with my question? I never brought up domestic violence in my question. Also, Christy, don't you think that what you're doing here is something that a religious zealot would do when posed with a question about their faith or ideals? Change the topic and point to their book for answers?
Chapter 1.
Chapter 1.
In the beginning.
This is a book, if people would like to go to Amazon and purchase it, that is...
Are you getting commission?
No.
Well, Christy, as I'm sure you may have noticed or overheard people talking about, I have a giant boot on my right foot, and I'm trying to put money away for when I have surgery because I'll be out of work for a few months. So I'm going to have to pass on that for now, but I might take you up on it later. So, about my question.
But I should.
Yeah.
It's a book about, oh God, there's something like 20 or 30 professionals who work every day in and out of their lives.
20 to 30 professionals working every day on how intersectionalism knows that it's helping me as an individual? Wow, desire to know more intensifies.
On people with domestic violence issues and intimate partner violence issues.
Oh, so this isn't about my question.
Which is very significant. And again, it's something that you need to understand how different people might come and might have a different experience. It's about not having a one-size-fits-all solution.
You're arguing for my point, Chrisiousity. The recognition of the individual and how we should take things on an individual basis? Intersectionalism argues for the group as a whole. I can argue that point by bringing up that intersectionalism and BLM go hand in hand. Unless it's Candace Owens, who was harassed and chased away from her breakfast. But here's one group I rarely hear brought up in domestic violence issues by intersectional feminists, and that's men. If you bring up issues with men, you are met with the usual ad hominems of misogynist or it's patriarchy or men's right activist or whatever. If intersectional feminism was about equal rights, then these men would be able to have equal access to, as you're pointing in your book, abuse shelters or something like that. In fact, I'm surprised no intersectional feminist has talked about making these abuse shelters genderless. I mean, after all, isn't gender a social construct? But I want to leave you guys on what David Smalley says here, because it's a powerful story of an individual. It's a story of why an individual should be recognized over the group, and why we need to stop lumping people into groups and slapping a label on them for the convenience of an argument. Anyway guys, thank you for watching, and don't forget to hit that like and subscribe button so you can see more videos like this, and stick around for David Smalley because this story is absolutely amazing. See you guys!
Well, that I think is the problem, is that assuming, okay, I just want to say something real quick. I'm the moderator. I see some confusion. I want to provide a specific example before we move on, if that's okay. It'll be very brief.
No, it's not. I'm censoring you.
So I went to high school. When I graduated high school, it was 92% black. It was a small town in Texas. I was on the football team. Quarterback refused to throw to me. He's like, your white ass isn't going to catch it anyway. Told me that all the time, flat out. There was a minority field trip. Everybody went except me and a few other white kids. We were sent to detention to go see Colin Powell speak because it was minorities only, so I wasn't allowed to go. And I grew up, in gang violence and things like that. And I had a very different experience from, I think, most whites in America. And then when I got to college, a professor came and said, I want you to, if you have an ethnic background, I want you to write about your background, your history, your family. If you're white, I want you to write about someone you know who has an ethnic background. And I wrote to the professor and I said, well, can I not share my story? I have this unique background from, Czechoslovakia and all this. And she said, you're white, you're a white male, we know your story. And that, I know, and that was the first time this ever hit me, and I thought, but you don't. My story as an individual is very important to me, and I was prevented from sharing because of the color of my skin. So, as to what you were saying, I think that's just an example for why people hear intersectionality and have a bad taste in their mouth.